Danish CSGO scene is one of the deepest in the entire world of Counter-Strike Global Offensive in terms of talent base. This is a scene which should be able to produce at least two teams, or at least one that could be a world champion, two that could be around that sort of top 6 level in the world, battling to become a contender or to become an elite titleist, if not maybe two teams that could be up there. If you look at the ESL 1 qualifier in Katowice the other day, the offline qualifier, there was 3 Danish teams competing to get in there. At least one or two of them had a decent chance to. One especially, the Dignitas one. And the TSM former Dignitas lineup with Device and those guys is already waiting in the main final. All this talent, and yet what has the Danish scene been able to produce with all this talent, all this opportunity, all these even teams that are going to events? Well, they had Western Wolves, which was a lineup that managed to finish top 2 twice, actually in a row. Back in early 2013, they managed to make it to the final of Esports Heaven Mad Cats Vienna, and then they made it to the final of Copenhagen Games and lost to NIP there when NIP was winning everything. Later on the same year, the same team was able to give NIP like the biggest map loss they'd ever had and utterly thrashed them like 16-2, 16-3 on Nuke at DreamHack Summer in the group stage. So there's one team, you're thinking, wow, if they can accomplish that, the Danish scene's going to go places. Totally different set of lineups in general. They had one or two of the players come over from that same Western Wolves lineup. They had the Copenhagen Wolves core, which went into Dignitas and is now TSM. This core of people was able to win maps off Very Games and NIP when those teams were the best in the world. They were able to constantly make round of 8 finishes. They were able to then transition that into constantly making semi-final finishes, round of 4. Yet what did they accomplish beyond that? 0 finals internationally, 0 titles internationally. Offline we're talking about here. So you have these different groups of players. You have an overall scene producing all these players and then other players that plugged in spots in these lineups over time. And you might be talking about 10 to 15 players here, and yet they couldn't, out of this 10 to 15, get one lineup that could ever win an international event. They couldn't ever get a team that was consistently going to be top 2. They couldn't ever get teams that were able to put up any kind of reasonable battle against the elite Swedish teams in terms of like, could this team ever be better than that team? It's not about whether the Danish team can be better than the Swedish team. It's about whether they could be better. I mean, think of it this way. Let me put it in this context. If I make a video now about the Swedish scene, then the video now would be about why isn't there a third team from Sweden that's like good, not elite level, but a good, like could battle around the top 8 in the world because they've got enough talent base to still put together a team like that. Yeah, they've got NIP. Yeah, they've got Fnatic, but they need that third team. That's the problem, though. Think about the way I'm phrasing that. Even though we're talking about a similar number of players and even level of players, really, the Swedish scene's got a team that's winning big events, Fnatic. They've got a team that are contending to win big events, NIP, like third best team in the world. Then, as a luxury, they could scoop up other players and make a third team that could be like 6th to 8th in the world. Going to the Danish scene, we've got TSM, who at the moment I have ranked, I think, like 5th in the world or something. Let me think. Yeah, I think it was 5th. Well, they're quite a ways away from getting into the top 2 at the moment and actually winning the event. Then their second best team, well, I would have thought at least their second best team could get into ESL 1 Katowice and that they'd be in the group stage, which would be Dignitas. I thought they'd get in there, that'll happen. Even that failed. They were completely smashed by, they lost to Kaboom, obviously. Overall, they lost to, it was a disappointing set of affairs if you think about it, really. So, now that we think about this whole situation, what is causing these problems in the Danish scene? Now, what's interesting about this one is there are some aspects that have nothing to do with the inner game stuff. There's aspects that are to do with lifestyle, and there's aspects that are to do with things about the way people's minds work and their motivations and the way they feel about the game. Then you can go into aspects of the game and do they have the right lineups, etc. So let's start outside of the game, believe it or not. This might seem impolite and people might get mad if I bring this up in a video, but this is real talk. One of the things that has caused problems in the Danish scene with some of the elite level players is what we will call, for the sake of politeness here and not causing too much of a problem for people who aren't in the know, as it were, is people's lifestyle choices around how their mental state is chemically affected. Now, if you don't know what that means, then I'm afraid you'll just have to be a heathen who's not initiated in the ways. But there are certain choices that people can make in their lifestyle as to how they're chemically attuned when it comes to everyday life, and when it comes to playing the game. Now, some of these Danish players have gone way too far into that realm. They've let that aspect of their lives either alienate them from other players and other teams, where those teams don't want to take them on because they go, oh, well, that guy messes around in that area and he's not serious and it's spoiling like his ability to play or his ability to practice. That's one of the problems, okay, is if you're going to go into that area, listen, if you know me as a person, I'm entirely for personal liberties, and that particular predilection is something that I enjoy myself, and it's something that I think can be a part of someone's life without being a detrimental force. I'm not someone who thinks that this is something that should hinder or cripple you. Even as a pro player, I don't ascribe to the idea that if you take part in that particular lifestyle choice, then that will ruin your play and you can't practice and you can't be good. I know from personal experience and from being around and spending time with some of the best players of all time in different games. Part of the problem there is people who've only briefly experienced that realm or that mental chemical state will think, oh, it's so disorientating and I can't remember things and I don't know what I'm doing. So they'll think to themselves, oh, well, if you do that, how could you ever be good at the game? You're going to be worse for sure and you'll be worse at playing the game and your senses. That's bullshit. The players who that's a part of their lifestyle, who are great players and who've managed to not make it a crippling aspect of their lifestyle. So I'm thinking of Quake players, even StarCraft Brood War players, Counter-Strike players, definitely. Some of these players that I've known and I've spent time with, like ones that were friends of mine where we've hung out and played over weeks and stuff, or ones that I've just known for a long time, some of these guys can play as good or better in that state than they can any other time. Partly because that's part of their lifestyle. That's how they're practicing. That's how they're playing a lot of their lives. Secondly, it's freeing them up a lot. They're people who are already creative, so it's helping put them in that certain mental state in that sense. I know personally I've done jiu-jitsu in this particular sense, and if once you've learned the techniques and you've got all the mechanical aspects down in your body, then there can be a freeing aspect to the way your mind transitions between one thing to another and anticipates something and visualizes. It's not that it's better, but it's a different state, and so it can produce different, and as a result, amazing in their own results. So that's not an excuse, okay? But my point here is when it's a team game and when you're doing that to an extent that maybe you are just going overboard and you're not actually listening during tactics and you're not applying yourself properly and you're just fucking around, and also you're giving off the vibe to teammates that this guy doesn't particularly care and he's not actually willing to dedicate himself to our team, that's going to alienate you. Now, why have I brought up this huge topic? Because there are at least two big names in this Danish scene. Remember those teams I mentioned before? Those great teams that were able to accomplish something. Players either from those teams or of that level. I'll say that to like save people's asses right there. So players either from those teams or of that level who could have that impact on the Danish scene and put them back into the position where we could get a lineup together that could win a world championship for Denmark. There are players who have chosen that lifestyle choice over everything else. They haven't been able to integrate it. Therefore, it's become a situation of other people saying, right, well, as long as they're involved in that and they're not dedicated, I can't be involved with them. And as a result, first of all, I've seen those players' level degrade. So I really wonder what's going on there in terms of their motivation and how that's affecting them. And then beyond that, it's not allowing them to get into teams, or if they are, as soon as they fuck around, that's why they're going to be kicked. They might be playing okay, but if what happens is when you get into problems where people are having disagreements or they're playing poorly, then people look for a reason to kick you. Unfortunately, they don't just kick you because they say that's a problem. So as a result, if you're someone who, this is why we see players who are like toxic and argumentative get kicked all the time. It's often not actually the arguing. It's that's the easiest excuse to kick you out with because everyone knows that you're argumentative. So if I say, oh, I kicked him because he was an asshole, he ruined the team, no one's ever going to question me on that. They're going to be, oh, okay. Beyond that aspect of chemically induced mental states, there's another aspect which you could actually describe the same way, chemically, let's say hormonally induced mental states, and that's called the female of the species. Now, girls, first of all, I guess this is maybe something in the early days of CS we didn't have that many problems with, is that there weren't that many girls around and a lot of us were super hardcore nerds, so people weren't having to worry about people getting girlfriends and having that be an issue in the team. Now, funnily enough, there were some if I could ever write a fucking book about this shit, I'm not the type of person who would, I could tell you some amazing teams that were destroyed by one girl with the wrong player at the wrong time, wrecking everything. But in these teams in particular, I mean, you'll have seen recently in the news, if you keep up with a lot of the news on these teams, at least two great players from these lineups I'm mentioning in the past who've had issues with girlfriends where either the girlfriend demands too much of their time or is literally either she's causing problems when they're at tournaments or in the event, or she's the vehicle by which the player then is badly behaved and causes problems and causes aspects at tournaments. This shouldn't even be a factor. Again, just as with the chemical and mentally induced states, it's perfectly fine to have girls. In fact, again, I enjoy that predilection. I would say that you can make it work. That shouldn't be an issue. But also, just like the other one, it can be a distraction. It can be a problem if you're the sort of person who can't handle your shit. If you're the sort of person who's going to go completely spaz out in this sense because a girl told you one thing and then you have to play a match next, or even worse, it affects your ego in some way where then you're going to be a total moron. Oh, she can't stand here while we're playing. Like, get a fucking grip, man. We're trying to play professional Counter-Strike here and be world champions. We're not trying to fucking decide who stands behind us at LAN. This is like the worst sort of... I'm not even calling these girls groupies, but the way this is affecting them reminds me of when you look in rock music and you hear these stories about a band breaks up over like how someone talked to a girl who was like one of their girlfriends or a groupie or something. Like, it's just ridiculous when you're talking about like the best musicians ever. We could have had like an amazing album from them at this period, but instead they were fighting. It's so unnecessary. So those two aspects, those aren't frivolously brought up, by the way. You could ask, well, they won't tell you, but if you were in my position, you could go and ask people in the Danish scene and they would point to these players and go, yep, that guy, and yeah, he was with the girls, and then, oh yeah, that guy enjoys getting a little bit tipsy sometimes. They would just tell you these issues that they have. Now let's go beyond that, because that had to be set up in the background, because that's something that isn't the case actually to the same degree in like the Swedish scene, from what I know. It's not crippling it to the same degree. People aren't getting as lost down those rabbit holes as they are in the Danish scene. In fact, there's almost no other scene I can think of that's as bad as that. I brought up something on an NA podcast a while ago in Moses where NA used to have a similar problem, especially the first one, the chemically induced states, that used to fuck with a lot of players. That's not as much of an issue anymore. So actually, Denmark, I'm sorry, when you're at this status where you should have these teams, that has to be called out. Now then, let's start to head towards the game now. We're not in the game yet, but one aspect that's a real problem in Denmark is practice and work ethic. Now, first and foremost, remember that Western Wolves lineup I mentioned before? They made these top twos. They gave Nip this savage beating. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when they gave Nip the savage beating, like 16-3, it was on Nuke, which was Nip's home map. That was the map you just didn't beat Nip on. Nip were monsters on that map. They gave them this savage beating, and yet at that event they only finished round of 8, and they never finished top 2 again. In fact, I don't think they ever had a big top 4 ever again. The lineup kept fracturing before that and afterwards, and then eventually just fell apart completely. And since then, they've always tried to bring it back together. There have been times, every single time since the Western Wolves lineup broke up, there have been 2 of the players together, 3 of the players together. Sometimes they get 4 of the players together. They never hold it together. First of all, the results aren't the same, but part of the problem that Western Wolves had was practice. Once they got to this really good level, they would immediately start to practice less, and certain members within the team who were vital members just wouldn't dedicate themselves and had this sort of mentality of like, right, well, we're here now, we don't have to practice that much. Listen, I'm not that bothered anyway. And listen, I get it. CS was smaller then. CSGO wasn't a big game. Even if you won the big LAN, some of them you'd only win like 5,000 euros, like 8,000 euros. This wasn't worth giving up your whole life for, although that's from like a normal person's perspective. As someone who's a passionate person about things that I'm interested in, I think that the merit of satisfying your own, testing your own human potential is entirely valid and should be the primary factor. So regardless of the money, you should be trying your best and trying to develop yourself the best and compete the best and see who you are and what you're made of. But regardless, okay, I get it, the game wasn't as big, there wasn't as much real world emphasis or priority on becoming the best and dedicating everything to it. But now it is the case. Now that should be out the window. Yet some of these same players have these same issues to this day and are fucking around and aren't dedicated enough and won't put in the work ethic. And now it's needed more than ever, because some of these players, I think still, some of them could still get back to the top level, but they're not going to if they just dick around now and think that they're still at the level they were before. It's the opposite. Now you need 3 times more work to get back to that level. Then we can talk about bringing you into these teams. We want to talk about practice and work ethic. Let's talk about Dignitas, now known as TSM. Now this team, listen, they were the one team within the Danish scene that was legit always getting these results at tournaments. In general, keeping the core together and not having so many problems. This might sound weird, but one of their problems was they didn't attend enough events. 2013 they attended plenty of events, but then they've in 2014, if you went and looked how many events they attended, I think internationally they might have attended like 4 or 5. We're talking legitimately 4 or 5 in a whole year. So as a result, they're taking all these months off. Yeah, they practice, they play online there. But I think that's an aspect of dedicating yourself to the game too. That in the early days of CS, in 2012, 2013, you could have that as an excuse like, oh, he's going to school and this, that and the other. Now that we're talking about a chance to become the best in the world and win hundreds of thousands of dollars and be legends and be immortal and actually make this your craft and something that you can remember years from now, it's not an excuse anymore to just be only attending like 4 events a year. That's not good enough. If you're going to do that, then don't fucking hold on to all the talented players in the scene and then not let anyone else who would go hell for leather 100% dedicate themselves have those players. This is ridiculous. It has to be one or the other. And again, I'm not talking about those players. I understand why those players make selfish choices for for themselves. But the scene as a whole can't prop this up and praise these guys in this sense. The scene as a whole has to take some sort of action, and players within the teams who aren't the ones afflicted by these scheduling issues have to look at themselves and go, I can't let that guy hold me back from my career. I have to make the best of it. And we've got this amazing scene, and there's other players we can do this with. Now let's go beyond that. There's a final aspect outside of the game, but to do with the mental aspect, choking. Now, I won't say Western Wolves choked, because the key thing about the Western Wolves lineup was that lineup it reminded me of the old lineup in 1.6 of the Poles. Neo, Taz, all those guys, the Golden Five, the original Golden Five, not the one with Pasha. Because in the original Golden Five, the key concept you need to understand is that Taz was the in-game leader for most of that team. So he actually, his individual game was way more limited than it was in latter days, when he became just like another star player, and he really was the second star to Neo. When he was the in-game leader, his role was really limited. So as a result, in their team, they only had one legit star player, who was Neo. Now, it just so happened he was the best star player, and so he used to be able to carry every game like Kenny S does now. And the rest of their job, because in 1.6 it was a lot more team play based and positional based, so as a result, you didn't need to outfrag people with everyone on the team. He would carry the fragging load, and the rest of them would team play to the extent that they were able to win enough rounds to win major tournaments. I always used to say about their team was the most extreme example of my theory that in CS, it's not that you need, like, there's two ways you can go. You can either have insane amounts of skill, in which case you need just enough team play and tactics to win. So think of like NIP in early CSGO. Or you can have loads of tactics and team play, and then you need just enough skill to win. You need just enough to get you over that part of the margin. If you don't have enough skill there and you've got all the tactics, then you might get a third one time, you might get some round of eights. That's the problem though. And so where their team in the polls there had their team play was awesome, intuitive team play. It had some decent tactics. Because it had the best player, it had enough skill, had just enough skill in this one guy to make a difference and be able to win. That's what Western Wolves was like. They weren't monsters. They basically had, Nico was, at the time, was playing some godlike CS. Then Pimp was like a sort of decent second star. And then the rest were just like team players and role players. But they had just enough skill, and they had the base of tactics and team play that, they didn't win any events, but they could make the finals in a way where Dignitas TSM never did afterwards. Now then, you look at the Dignitas TSM guys, they had way more skill, but they didn't have enough tactics. They didn't have enough overall team play. They were going the other side of the equation. And their problem as well was, what happened is, when Western Wolves, it's like you felt like they got the maximum out of their team and they gave the most, and then they just didn't win because someone outskilled them or had slightly better tactics that day. In Dignitas' case, you look at all the times they've lost, and you can't deny it. They're choking. Certain key players are choking. As a team, they're choking. They have an environment around them where somehow, it's not that it's okay to choke, but that when choking happens, you just look at their players, and they're not the players who have that determination wrought across their face, written there that this guy's not going to lose and it's not going to happen. They're the guys who are like, oh, is this happening again? Oh, no, I can already see from that guy, he's gone, and it's not going well for me. Like, come on, guys, let's keep going. But it's like, it's hollow words. It doesn't mean anything. And they never could grind back. They were always just front runners. So this choking cost them because they didn't have the team player tactics aspect. They had a little bit too little there, but then on top of it, the mental aspect destroyed them completely. Now, if you go into actual players, one of the big problems, and we'll start with that Dignitas now TSM lineup, is that the Danish scene, once it got into the era where they were number one, constantly showed this bias towards raw individual skill manifested through aiming precision. So the Dignitas and TSM lineups constantly smashed their lineups over and over and over, replaced this guy with this guy, this guy with this guy, with just skilled aimers. Skilled aimer, skilled aimer, skilled aimer, skilled aimer, skilled aimer. This isn't an approach to winning tournaments. I mean, there were times where you could look at these lineups and they had more skilled lineups than some teams that went to finals and won finals, like Clan Mystic, who was that big fluke. Some of the Dignitas and TSM lineups are way more skilled than that Clan Mystic lineup was. Na'Vi, who won the Star Ladder, they were way more skilled than that one. I Buy Power, they were even more skilled than them. They had more skill, but they were never able to win because they never had the right mix of skill. They just kept putting the most skilled in. And if someone did badly, they'd take out the least important in terms of the hierarchy of the team. And they'd put in another skilled, either rising aim star or a former aim star that they had before. And so let's talk about skilled players first. Because Denmark has these skilled players who either now are really skilled or have the potential to be like elite level skilled players. Now, what's interesting is you have to start in this lineup with Nico, because he was the original star of Denmark in CSGO. Now, the problem with Nico here, as you'll have seen if you saw the ESL 1 Katowice qualifier, yeah, every now and then he'll have a round where he whips it out and he has that AWPing that's really on fire, but his level isn't even close to where it was at Western Wolves. I don't know what's happening to him as a player, and with the way it's going at the moment, I would hope, because of all the money and opportunity in CSGO now, that he will get back on track and he could get to that level. I think it's possible, but the way it is right now, I couldn't bet on it right now. I couldn't put my money on it after all these chances to do so. After all these times that you had a decent lineup of getting Wolves and now in Dignitas, when I thought, okay, if he just gets back to that level individually, he'll have some sort of Kenny S style carrying shit. That'll get them into a better position. Then you know what? Maybe they get a player who leaves Dignitas and then they boast to themselves. Then this should have been the opportunity now. They've got Fetish now who can lead them. Yeah, he's not a great in-game leader, but he can provide veteran leadership. He can help some of the younger guys, put them in place. You've got Nico there as a star. You've got the young stars there. This should be the time. It's not happening, and part of it's because of Nico. He's not having that star impact on the game. When I look at his name doesn't reflect what he's showing me in-game, and yet he is a very skilled player. Crucially, he could be the dedicated AWPer in Denmark. You know, when we talk about how Device needs to use the AWP more, how Cajun Beacon sometimes use it, Nico could blow them all out the water. He did, and he could. He's the guy who legitimately could be battling Kenny S and Guardian and those guys for best AWPer in the world, but he isn't. And at the moment, he's not close to doing so. Now, it's also an interesting point that once you go beyond Nico, you're going to get to all these players where nearly all of them are going to be players who are either in TSM now or were in TSM / Copenhagen Wolves lineups, the ones of that core, not the latter day Copenhagen Wolves, at one point in time. And you can ask yourself, if you've got all these star players who could be like the best player on any team, or all these guys here either could be the primary star on a team that could be top 5 or 6 in the world, or the second star. Instead, a bunch of them have all been in the same team at the same time and just wasted those talents and had someone just not doing that so good a job in less of a star role, but also not contributing the other aspects and not being a superstar. So it's just been a waste of time. You've hoarded all this talent and wasted our time. So Device, we'll start right there. Skill-wise, he could be the best Danish player. He might even be the best Danish player if we take into account all aspects of the game, online and offline, and round of 8s and group stages. Yes, he falls apart badly in semi-finals, but overall, take his whole performance, and he probably is the best Danish player. He's the most complete Danish player. His all-around game is very good. He can win in all aspects of the game. He can dominate frags-wise. He can get the insane kills from an aim duel. He can out-AWP someone. He can get that bananas 1v2 kill in like just rifles people in the heads and then wins around. The things that this guy can do, T-side, CT side, doesn't matter. Give him any rifle, give him the AWP. He could be really amazing. His problem always has been, not only does he choke, but you can even see from his style of play, when he's on his game and he's not affected by that, he's aggressive. He's putting game impact out every round. He's dominating here. He's battling this guy and beating them. He's killing these people in a way where, if you talk to people who've scrimmed against Dignitas, they get fucking demoralized playing against Device, because he just like wrecks them completely. He just runs through maps, ripping people apart, and they think to themselves, how can we beat this team? This team's going to win the next major. Then they go to the major and they'll fall apart to Na'Vi in a semi-final in an embarrassing way, where Na'Vi was never going to win the event. It's one thing if you lose to Nip, you're losing to Na'Vi now. Like, this is just embarrassing shit at this point in time. And unfortunately, a lot of it has to come to Device, because he could be the best player in his soul scene and lead the way for them. Go beyond Device, you get to Dupree. Now, Dupree I have a lot more time for, because in his case, I feel like, first of all, within his team, I think he's the one who's in the best. His role makes the most sense in terms of what he can do and what he does do. As that entry fragging second star level player, where if Device is the best player and he was able to have that game impact, Dupree's doing it almost on a fairly consistent basis, where he'd actually be giving you what you need, that you'd have the two pieces in place to have this great team, and then you put other team play pieces around them, and they could be the best team in the world. They could win a major event. Well, maybe best team in the world's a bit hard, because you have to keep winning consistently. They could win a major, put it that way. They could win international events. They could make all these finals and give themselves chances. Dupree in general has done that. I feel like he's probably, out of all these names I'm going to list now, the only one who doesn't have huge flaws that's dragging him down. His flaws are his teammates, and apparently that he's bought into, first of all, having Fetish as the in-game leader for so long when it wasn't working on T-sides. That's just a fact. And then secondly, apparently he's bought into this idea that we need to keep ramming the lineup with just skilled aimers over and over, and never seeing that that's not getting us there. First of all, we're not out shooting people and winning major events, therefore the aiming aspect isn't helping us. And secondly, we're not doing that well on T side, and we're not doing that well in terms of like executing strats. That probably requires some tactics and team play there, mate. So I have to that's his flaw, is that he hasn't looked at his own talent and had more of an impact on the team in that sense, in terms of who they recruit and who they hold on to. Maybe you can blame him on that, but in general, I don't have that much blame for him. So to me, Dupree's one that probably has to be in whatever the best Danish team is. Go beyond that, we're another player from TSM, Cajun B. Cajun B, unfortunately, is a bit streaky. He's not the guy who consistently puts out a certain amount, and yet he gets put into this second or third star role within Dignitas and TSM. And within that role, ideally, I want that player to be fairly consistent. And you can have a big game sometimes, but I need a base level from you. Now, the problem with Cajun B is he'll have the huge game where he drops the 25, 30 kills. But then he'll have a game where he just does nothing and he gets 10, 11 kills and he doesn't seem to be exerting a skill over people. He's not dominating this certain way. You can't rely and know that he's consistently going to do this for you. And so with him, my approach with him is I would never want him in my third star position like he is at the moment. I want him to be either my main star and go, look, because listen, actually, one of the things about him is he seems quite cocky. He seems quite confident. I like that. In a star player, I like that. If I want a star player in my team, I want someone like that. And I want to put them in position, go, listen, you're quite cocky. You think you're good. You think you're better than these people. You think your team can win. Right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to design the game around you. We're going to put you in the positions you want to be in with the weapons you want. We're going to set things up so that you get the flashes and the entries you want, and you get into a position where you can do your work, and then you're gonna take us as far as we can go. So if you're my star player, and then I've got a solid second star, and I've got some decent role players, and I've got good tactics around us, you're gonna carry me. You're the star player of my team. You're gonna be my Get Right. You're gonna be my Kenny S. You're gonna be my Shocks. You're gonna be my Crims. You're gonna carry us to the promised land. That's what I want to do with a player. I don't just want to throw him in the mix with a bunch of other good players and have everyone go, listen, this team's democratic. We're all just good in this team. Listen, we've all got good aim. So if we all just play great in this game, then we'll win the game. It never happens. You've never done it yet. You've never made a single fucking final once, because that scenario that you described that never has happened ever. In fact, you're losing to teams that are less skilled than you man for man, and they're outskilling you in certain games, because the difference is they're getting their skill, they're manifesting their skill into the server by having people in the right roles to be able to do things that make sense. Titan just made let's talk about this for a second. Titan have made the finals of international tournaments and even won DreamHack Stockholm with way less skilled lineups than these Dignitas and TSM lineups. Why? Because they were able to put people in the right roles that made sense for them, and they might have had less skilled players, but he's able to do his role and contribute properly. Yeah, if you put Cajun B in this other role, he'd be a monster. He'd be dropping 30 frags. He's not in that role, and he's not doing that, and he's not able to do that as a result. So there's a problem for a start off. Now you go past those, you get to another name where this guy, I don't think has any flaws in terms of his game. And people are going to be shocked I'm going to put him in this category, the most skilled players, the ones that could be stars and top players. Pimp, the guy who's in Dignitas now. Pimp was a great example of a second star. When you have the really godlike, amazing single star like a Nico Shocks, Get Right, Kenny S type guy, what's amazing is if you can have a second star who has a really consistent level, who has an all-around game, and who can just and who has like a team play mentality, but he's got the star impact on the game. Pimp was really underrated in the Western Wolves lineups. He was definitely the second best player. He used to have really solid games, some massive games as well. He was the guy who really added to the rest of it, made them have just enough skill. He added them just up there. And as a result, I feel like when I look at his game since then, yeah, there have been periods when he's been in bad teams where it hasn't been as good, but he's the guy who's consistently brought his level back up again, every few months, back up again to a high level. And yeah, I'm sure those TSM guys are probably laughing now, like, Pimp, we'd shit all over him, I'm way better than him. Yeah, here's the difference, mate. Pimp actually is in a position where he doesn't fucking choke like you guys do. He doesn't just play like a fucking moron and just go only for aiming, like, and then he also doesn't have a shitty attitude to teammates. He understands this concept. You've got to have tactics, you've got to have team play, you've got to have roles set within the team. You've got to give other people roles, you've got to sacrifice, if you're a lesser player, things yourself and make sure it's something you can do. He understands all these concepts. He has a great mind for the game, actually, in terms of these star players. He has the best one, for sure. His problem as a player, and this is a thing I've got into if you ever go back and watch that video I made about JW, it's called JW the Reviled, where I make a point about JW and Get Right. Because bizarrely, Pimp reminds me of those players. Now, he's not as skilled as them, and he's not a main star player like they are. But what he reminds me of in their sense, is that first of all, These are players where, well, they look funny, they sound funny, and when I say funny, by the way, I mean a bit off. Like people, they just seem weird. Okay, that's the best way to say it. They're just weird. Now, listen, they're not nice guys. I actually like all those guys and I get along with them very well because I understand them. I've talked to them quite a lot, and I can see what makes them in that way. But there's a certain sort of person where, if you just seem a bit weird, first of all, when you're talking about young men, part of the way that young men identify with each other and bond with each other and form like group identities, we all know it's like hazing people and shunning people and bullying people. That's a way of, by pushing him away and saying, listen, he's not part of us, but we all agree we're cool and we're all part of it. That's part of social dynamics. I get that. But that's the problem for people like Pimp, JW, Get Right. They'll never be truly respected for how good they are until they like dominate their opponents, until it gets so that the opponent is sick of losing to them and gets a chance and goes, you know what, let's just have him in our team, then we won't lose to him anymore and he can do what he does here and I can respect what he does there and I do what I do here and we're all better as a result. Unfortunately, Pimp's never quite been in that position because of his teams falling apart in Western Wolves and the Dignitas lineups having all the mad aimers where they could just say, oh, we shot on him, we've got way more skilled players than him. So I feel like he could be a key piece if he was in the teams. He was even pretty decent when he was in Copenhagen Wolves at the end of 2013. Listen, compared to the other names there, in reality, Nico, Device, Dupree are the three that should be the stars. Cajun B's on the brink, and then Pimp's just below them. Of all those ones, he's at the bottom, but the difference is he brings intangibles of like team play understanding. He could be like, it reminds me a bit of NBK in the sense that he has a star player skill set, but he has a mentality and understanding of the team base and how to build up the tactics and the team play of a game that normally is only for role players and in-game leaders, not stars usually. Go beyond those players, so you pick and match any of those you want as your star and your second star. Now let's get to the rising talents / potentials. Now, Denmark has players who over and over again, it's looked like this is going to be the next guy who rises up, he's going to be the star. But, first of all, they either just get taken into Dignitas when they were the top team and just used for 3 months and thrown away so they don't get a chance to properly develop and they're not in a proper role, or they don't make it. Now, part of the problem is, again, you need to understand the roles in the game. These sorts of guys with their skill level should be either the third star in the team, like the hybrid between the carry player and the support player, or a solid second star, and they don't have to totally carry the load. They've got some great player carrying the load every game, and then when they contribute, they're learning their role and how to become a star, and maybe one day they could be a main star, but they're not now, so you don't give them that responsibility, but you also don't put them in the worst spot in the team as like a support player and then expect someone whose only skill is being really young, eager and good at aiming to do a support role player, team player shit that he doesn't understand and hasn't developed in. So these players, one of them right now, Kirby, he's this young guy, seems like he has good aim, seems like he has a fire for the game. Now then, looks like he chokes a bit. He's a young guy, he hasn't had a chance, he hasn't been blooded properly, he hasn't had the proper experience. He's a guy where, of all these names, I'd say he's the one who's there's still some decent hope in him, I think. But not quite there yet. But if you want to fill in if you want to break up that top group I made there, maybe we could pop him in as the third or the second star on a team. Go to a player who's been in Dignitas, AZ. He's in the current Dignitas lineup. I actually thought of all these players I'm going to list now, AZ got the worst end of the stick, as it were. He got the hardest route and was given the least credit. Like, he was put into a lineup where to this day, I don't understand what his role was supposed to be in the team. He wasn't used to the maximum of his talents. He was put in a position where he wasn't going to be able to do what you asked of him, and therefore he was going to fail sometimes, and then he's going to get kicked out of the team because he was going to be his fault. But how can it be his fault when all these other teams that also don't have him in, so he's not the connecting factor, get the same failures and the same levels of success in every other tournament? It's not him that's causing you to fail. So I thought AZ was a pretty decent player. I think he should probably be, based on his temperament, I think I'd put him in like the third star role, like the hybrid half-star role. I think he would be a solid guy where he'd contribute some games, but you just want a consistent level from him. I don't want him to have to go crazy and feel that pressure. Just put him in a consistent third role. The guy who they always hyped at the end of 2013 was Rals. Everyone in Denmark kept saying, this guy's going to be a monster, he's going to be the next great one. What happened to him? I mean, I've been watching, waiting for this to happen, and I haven't seen it. Yeah, I see some crazy online games every now and then, but in terms of the LAN performance, it hasn't been there. And I think there's a reason as to why people haven't really given him a chance whatsoever out of all these names. So I don't know whether he's a lost cause yet, but he's in that rising talent / potential pool. The last guy I'm going to mention in this particular pool is Tenski. Now, Tenski, unfortunately, by being a bit of an idiot with that whole thing of like talking shit to the Finns, who are like some of the nicest guys in the fucking scene, hasn't really given himself the best PR image as a way to... That's the way a lot of people know him, because of that shit talking. As a player, actually, I'd put him along with Kirby. He's still a young guy. He's still got some potential. He's shown it sometimes. He's even shown it a little bit on LAN. I actually think that, yeah, he's up there with Kirby. I'd put AZ as the best of these rising talents, but Kirby and Tensky, they're just below them, I think. This is a good mix to take players out from where, listen, you don't want to just be like TSM and only keeps trying those star players and racking the team with them. But hey, why not go for one of these as the third star? We can get the 2 established stars from the other group, get one of these as the third guy, put him in the mix. Now we need some team players. Now we need some role players to mix out the team. Now I'll admit it's a lot harder to figure these out. Thanks in part, by the way, to you awesome guys in Dignitas constantly ramming your fucking lineups with all the aimers. Therefore, we don't know who the fucking team players are because you never let any of them develop. This is something I used to go on at the NA scene for. In the NA scene, you know why you don't get guys like Fiflarin who have won big tournaments, been a part of really successful lineups, but aren't like the most individually. You know why you don't get those players? Yeah, they never make it in your scene because even in like the 5th best NA scene, they're just trying to look for is there an aimer we can upgrade this position with, bring him in. Like as a result, you don't get those players, they don't get to the top, they don't develop, you don't get to see the other aspects of the game beyond just killing people, and you never get those guys as a result. So we've already got a few players who can fit this category in Denmark. And unfortunately, yes, they're going to come from that Western Wolves lineup, which is the only team that truly showed that it had role players that worked on a top international level. And so unfortunately, some of these names might sound like a joke now because they haven't been at top level for a long time, but they're still around the scene to a degree. I mean, one of them's like fucking banned or something. But they're still around the scene to a degree, and at least I know they did do it once. So if not these players, then I need players who are like these players. So the 2 that come to mind, it's obvious. MSL and Nile. These were the players where they could play a role aspect, and they were never going to be a star. They didn't have the skills to be a star, but they could play a set role, do something within a tactic, contribute. That's a key word, contribute. Not dominate, contribute. Because when you contribute, then if you're a role player, your contribution is all we need from you. Contribute in this way, do what I asked. Then it's on this guy to do the next thing that you've set him up to do. Then it's on my stars to get the kills that we're setting them all up to do and putting them in good positions and win their aim duels and their aim battles. And then because we've executed and everyone's done everything that needs to be done, now we've just won the round. We don't need 5 people to run in a headshot everyone. First of all, there's no fucking team in the world does that. And secondly, that's just not going to happen anyway. That's not the way that team dynamics work. It's so hard to make 5 totally disparate individuals work as a cohesive unit. It's better to have people who are all working towards one mind. So they were the guys in the past. Now I will put in this group a guy where this will sound strange because people will think in the past he would have been in the Rising Talents group. Now some people might want to put him in the top skilled group. But I would put him in this role because I think this is his true role, which is Zipnix, the guy who's in TSM now. Just in terms of personality, I think in terms of skills, there were times when he looked like a really good rising talent. He was the best of the rising talents in Denmark. It looked like in terms of skills, maybe he should be your 1st or 2nd star. Maybe that's legitimately where he should be. The key thing about him that is a flaw is that he doesn't have the mental aspect for that. And what I mean by that is he doesn't have that inherent inner confidence, the cockiness, the kind of drive like, I am the best, I will beat the other guys, I won't stop until I am the best, I'll have game impact, I'm going to win this round right now. That's not his personality, that's not his makeup at all. And so with him, I'd actually prefer he went like the route of like an NBK and LDLC now, well, they call it NV now, where he just went the pure team play, work with the in-game leader, have a set role, and because he's got skills, he can execute this aspect. That's the role I'd rather he went. There's another group of people. These are X 1.6 names who the name has value, but they've never really shown us it in CSGO. The first one's Freeze. Now, at the end of 1.6, this guy's level had gotten really good. He was at the position where he was probably like the 3rd or 4th best AWPer in the world. Now, admittedly, he was mainly a CT side AWPer, where you just lock down, sit in one position in AWP. He wasn't that great picking T side AWPer, but he was at this solid level. In CSGO, he's never really been at that level. If I look at, in fact, why I'm even saying it like, it's on the verge. He's never been at that level, and he would know it himself. He's tried to get that aspect going. It's never been there, quite frankly. A lot of the AWPers actually from 1.6 didn't transition. Bizarrely, a lot of the source AWPers did, which is an interesting factor. Maybe that's a source for a video one day. But there was times when he was decent. He helped Copenhagen Wolves qualify for DreamHack Winter 2013, that first major. He had this little run with them there. But all in all, yeah, I mean, I can't really look and say that he's worthy of being in that top group. He's not at all. If I was going to use him, maybe he could be like a 3rd star on your team, that sort of a position. Because he's going to have to be an AWPer. He's going to have to do it a lot. Because otherwise, what's the point? That's the guy's strength. You have to play to your strengths. If you can't do your strengths, I'm sorry, we can't have you in the team. That's the way like team dynamics work. I haven't totally given up on him. I think if the game keeps getting bigger and he applies himself, he can be in like whatever our third team that we're going to make out of all these players is. He could be in that third team. He could be there, and maybe he'll be with some good players so he can do some things. I'm not giving up on him. One name I have pretty much given up on is Colon, because this guy never did anything in 1.6. He had like one LAN or something where he was decent. He was mainly known as an onliner, quite frankly, by a lot of the top pros, suspected as a cheater. And when I've seen some of the videos, I can't say conclusively he cheated, but some of them look pretty suspicious. So the fact he didn't really do anything there, and then in CSGO he just continually plays in the worst Danish teams and just doesn't really do freaking anything. I think he made like a couple of finals where he got his head caved in by the Copenhagen Wolves guys. I think that's about it as far as all he did. I think that's right. Towards the end of 2013, there was like 2 finals where they just bashed him in at one LAN. Wasn't his team called something like Awesome? Anyway, so I haven't particularly got much help for that guy. I mean, I could guess he could have some skills, but there's some reason why no one's even taken him in these big teams. Does he even dedicate himself? He might not even be a factor. So I'd rather just mention him, but then go away from that. Final aspect, leadership. Because we're going to need in-game leaders, right? What if I told you we have 3 in-game leaders in Denmark? We need 3 teams, right? Got 3 in-game leaders. Let's start at the top. Fetish. I don't get the hype around this guy. If you're an in-game leader, the mark of a great in-game leader, there's 2 ways you can be a great in-game leader. Either you call tactics, you read the game, and you have great tactics designed, you call them at the right time, and you read the game, therefore you're having like a tactical direct input on the game, and you win rounds on T-side as a result of that, and we go, yes, you're a really good, great in-game leader. Or, with your particular team, your team's more based around skills, raw skills, and certain people who are brilliant in their own way, you give that tactical input away in terms of small autonomy to these players. You allow them to trigger the action and you just sit behind it and you're just like a slightly cohesive aspect and you just tilt the missile and then let it go off. You don't like direct it the whole way. You just go right this way. There you go. You can go. So like exist style. Or Pronax style. You either do that style or you do the existence glaive style hardcore attack. It's one or the other. With Fetish, I feel like he falls between the 2 and gets neither of the success. Doesn't get loads of T rounds, and we're talking about once we're in semis and round of 8s and finals. Well, he's never been in any finals, but he doesn't get those big T halves, and yet that's the mark of the good in-game leader. And it's not that he hasn't had enough talent. He's had the most talent of anyone in the Danish scene. All the talents he's had at different points in time, and he could never find a way to make it work. That's a very damning thing. So listen, I haven't given up on him. I'd still have him within the scene, but I'd have him on the 2nd or 3rd best team. And what I'd do is, instead, I'd go, listen, you haven't got great tactics, but what you can bring to the team is you can bring veteran leadership. You can be an emotional leader, which I'm not. I'd have to say, from watching those games at the ASL qualifier, I'm not sure he really did a good job of that. When they were down at Sarah, he just seemed like he just chilled out, like, yeah, whatever. If he dies, he dies. He was like you can't be the in-game leader like that. Either be a guy who actually guides them, does like a mentor role, or be the veteran in terms of like, get these younger guys like the Kirby, the Rals, Tensky, these sorts of guys and show them like, listen, you've got all the skills here, just work on this aspect here. Or you know what, within this tactic, you're saying you can do this within it, but I can see that you can't do that. Like, you either have to stop bullshitting me and tell me you have to have this role, which gives you more of a responsibility because you're taking a key role, or take a lesser role and just contribute over here. He either has to be that sort of guy who could actually help totally shape all these up-and-coming players to be the next great players, or he probably does have to just go to a lower level. I don't think he can be on the best team as the in-game leader, unfortunately. Carrigan actually has been doing pretty solid in TSM overall. People have over-exaggerated it. In general, it's been better than Fetish. They had these better T-sides. That was a much more of a T-sided tournament, if you notice the meta of that tournament. So Fnatic, LDLC, NIP were all playing on T-side. It was a very much more T-sided meta in that one particular tournament of how the teams played each other. So I can't entirely give him total credit there because everyone else did it as well at the same time on the same CT-sided maps. But I noticed positive signs here. And I think he's got a better attitude for how to lead a team in terms of having talked to him myself and seen the way he's led teams in the past. I think overall he's got a better approach to it. And he's going to be a mixture. What's funny is he's probably going to try a mixture of the 2 different styles I said he usually have to do, but leaning more towards the individual stars triggering things. I think that's actually got a better chance of working. I don't know if that's the best one. The guy who could be the best in-game leader, by far, in the Danish scene is Glaive. But this guy has something mentally going on that I don't get. And I don't mean like mental as in like he's a moron or he's just like he's like insane or crazy or whatever, but there's something off about this guy where first of all, I've heard there's periods and times where he isn't even an in-game leader. He's just trying to be a player. Imagine if Existence was just trying to be a player. What the fuck would the point be? I'm not going to have him in my team in that case. The whole thing Existence brings is his brain and the strategical input on the game. Then we put up with his skills. If you're Glaive, you must be the in-game leader, and you must dedicate yourself to that old style of tactics, anti-strats, reading the game, knowing the roles, demanding that people do these certain things, because in that sense, you could be really good, and a team from Denmark could be really good. I don't feel like he's embraced it. I feel like his flaw is being mentally into it in the right way, and just giving up some of those aspects. And, as we've seen recently, the in-game leader ideally should be the calm guy who manages the energy level. He knows when to raise it, he knows when to bring it back down. He knows when to tell people, listen, that didn't work, but just try it again. We're going to execute properly this time. It's going to work this time. Don't worry about it. I've read the round. It's the right tactic for now. Instead, this is a guy where he has all those skills, and yet he's the guy who's arguing with people. He's the one causing strife in the team. We can't have this if we're going to be a world-class team and win majors. So you can see, as I've gone through all those different categories there, in every category, there's maybe like 2 players in each category who actually can fit the category properly and really give us that. The rest all have some sort of crippling flaws. And so when you add together these mixtures, unsurprisingly, they haven't been able to win the major or win big finals as these teams. But I haven't given up on them. Every day is a chance to turn it around. All these players, I'm sure some of them must know their flaws. If they don't know their flaws, then their teammates have to be honest with them and actually hold them accountable and say, listen, these are the flaws that we have. And it's not like, because it's your flaw, like you deal with it and I'm kicking you out of the team. It's like we all have to figure out a way to make this work. And if this is your flaw in a certain sense, I've said this about the device choking thing, then if we're going to keep you in the team as the rest of the team, we have to take responsibility for the fact of knowing that that flaw exists and either support you in a way where it's not existing in that sense, or directly in game set up situations where sometimes you can do this, other times we take the load for you. It has to be one or the other. It can't just be this ridiculous scenario like this. And so I actually think it's a great scene in terms of the talent depth, the diversity of different roles. This is a scene which should have a world champion or a team that wins international events. It should have another team that's top 4, top 5, and it should have a third team that's in the top 10. They should have 3 Danish teams in the top 10. If they mix these players up right and they get the right mental approach and overall strategical approach to the team. There's a fly at there. So I don't know why the Danish scene's in a mess. Well, I do. I just sort of went through it in this massive fucking 45-minute video. But aside from that, it shouldn't be. And so I hope that sooner or later Denmark gets its shit together, stops playing musical chairs with the TSM lineup, and we get some real teams. Let's have a team that's got a good mix of skill and just enough team playing strategy. Let's get a team that's got just enough skill and some tactics and role playing. Let's get a team that doesn't choke and gets the best out of lesser players, and we'll have these 3 teams in the top 10. We'll have a world champion, we'll have a top 4. What a world it'll be. What a great CSGO scene.